This is Wheel Bearings. I'm Dan Roth from Forbes.
And I'm Sam Abuel-Samad from Guidehouse Insights. And Rebecca is off babysitting a couple of nephews this evening.
Are they legitimately young nephews? Was that?
Well, I saw one picture that it was clearly a young kid, so I'm assuming they're young nephews.
Okay.
I know she has an older nephew that was living with her for a while, living in her house, but he's moved out now. So I think she's babysitting for one of her siblings.
So like legitimately babysitting.
Yes, yeah. Legitimately babysitting.
Right.
She can't be here this evening.
Well, Auntie Rebecca will be back sometime soon. And you know what? It's interesting. The show that you guys did, I was like, when I edited it last week, I was like, oh God, I wish I was there for that. Because you guys had a question about a sound meter. And
oh yeah, well we can always come back to that one.
I was like, I have a sound meter. I haven't broken it out in years, but the reason for that is that you can just get a sound meter app for your phone, and
right,
the mic on your phone.
Although I don't know how accurate those things actually are, though. It depends on the mic and things like that.
I mean, there's a little variation. Basically, it'll tell you kind of sort of close enough, but there's a lot that goes into sort of measuring sound, and I don't know how good we'd be at it,
Well, and there's also do you measure it in decibels? Do you measure it in zones? Because they're actually measuring two very different things. One is measuring sound pressure,
right? And
zones, decibels is measuring sound pressure. Because sound is made by waves, pressure waves in the air, in the atmosphere.
Right.
And zones is actually measuring the loudness of the tone and the type of tone it is. Yeah. And manufacturers have, over the last, I don't know, it's probably about 20 years, like, early 2000s, I think, when I was still working at TRW as an engineer, and they were doing sound measurements of the ABS systems. They switched from measuring by decibels to measuring by zones because it gave you a better indication of the sound quality.
Right, yeah.
Which is important.
Zones is definitely, I think a lot of industries use zones. But you can convert zones to dB if you wanted to, because I think the general public very much understands decibels versus zones, but zones is a much more comprehensive measurement. Like you said, it sort of takes the quality of the noise into account, and even with sound pressure, you got to be careful. Is it A weighted, which mimics the response of your ear, or is it C weighted, which is much more broadband? And then in a car driving down the road, are you holding the meter, and so are you introducing handling noise, or is the meter sitting on something, which is again going to introduce rumble because it's just going to physically vibrate the mic capsules? So we could take some measurements. We could play around with some apps. It's not a terrible thing. But generally cars are, when you look at the decibel level, they're not all that different in terms of the sound pressure. It's more the quality of the noise. I think that's one of the things that we talk about, and I'll talk about it a little bit with one of the cars I was driving, but, certain brands tend to be a little noisier. They may not measure noisier, but they have a particularly fatiguing noise quality in the way that, the soundproofing lets certain frequencies through and certain ones get blocked. So, yeah.
And, I think that definitely applies to the Toyota 86 that I was just driving. I think that's definitely a sound that, while it's fun for a while, I think it would be fatiguing if you were driving this all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's the zones versus decibels too. Like that's a lot like horsepower and PS, right? Like most of the power measurements now are done in PS, right?
Yeah. Although PS is still measuring the same thing. It's measuring the rate of torque, basically the rate of torque delivery. It's just a slightly different scale.
Yeah,
because it's basically metric horsepower. So
metric
it's kind of
horsepower.
like,
isn't that kilowatts?
Kind of like imperial. Well, yeah, I mean same thing. So it's measure. It's like imperial gallons versus U.S. gallons.
Oh right,
so it's
metric gallons,
or Celsius versus Fahrenheit. Same measurement, but different scaling.
Yeah. So I'm happy to grab an app and take some sound measurements if I remember.
It'd be interesting if you could do that and compare it to the sound meter and see how accurate the apps are.
Yeah.
See how much impact that has.
The nice thing about the apps, because my sound meter is an older one, I used it actually for setting up like my mix position in audio post rooms, where there is a standard. I wanted to mix to a 79 dB. I think it was A weighted back in the day, so I'd put on pink noise. I think pink noise. Or pink noise or white noise. Well, anyway, I'd tone the room and I'd set up the mix position so that I'd have 79 dB because I was mixing for TV, not for movies. So for movies, if you're on a movie stage and you're editing, you're mixing, it's 85 dB. Which, if you've ever been around 85 dB, that's loud. I don't want to be exposed to that for an 8-hour stretch. So I prefer...
85 is that's the threshold that they recommend not going over.
Right. Particularly like for long-term exposure. Yeah. Like,
right.
It kind of correlates, like, give yourself a break after an 8-hour workday of that. And I'm like, nah, and something like mixing, I actually tend to vary the level. So I would mark out where 79 was, because there's the way your ear works is, there's the Fletcher-Munson curve. So you get up at a particular sound pressure level and the frequency response of your ear flattens out. And that's the flattest it's going to be. So did not mean to turn this into a podcast about
this week in sound geekery.
Yeah. There's a lot to it, though. I'm happy to do it. I think actually one of the things that would be really cool is if we could be a little lazy and just crowdsource a sort of a list of things that people want us to measure within reason, please.
Yeah. We don't have test tracks at our disposal, and fifth wheels and all kinds of other gear. So
yeah, but if there's something that you always go for on a car and you want us to just consistently take a look at that particular thing, we can create maybe a Google Doc or something. But in the meantime, just email us and we'll get it. It's podcasts at wheelbearing.media. Wheelbearings.media.
No, actually, it's feedback at wheelbearings.media.
Jesus. Okay.
It's okay. Dan's going to edit all this out. It'll never appear in the show.
Totally going to edit it.
No, don't.
Now I'm going to leave it. All right. So let's move on to actually the cars we've been driving. And Sam, right. I'll let you go first. So what's the first one you want to talk about?
The 2020 Volvo XC90 T8. And it's funny, when I was scheduling cars for this month, the young lady at the fleet management company, the drive shop that was doing this one, said, she sent me the list and had the XC90 on there. And I thought, haven't I just recently driven this? I thought I'd driven it recently. She looked back at my schedule and said, no, you haven't been in this thing since 2016.
Wow.
So
it was brand new then.
I've been in a bunch of other Volvos, the V60 and the XC60 and the XC40 and things like that. But I hadn't been in the XC90 for a while. And, it's interesting, in a lot of ways, it's like all the other modern Volvos, which is mostly really good. It's just bigger. It's just more. The same thing but more. And I like the look of it. This generation of the XC90 is, getting towards the end of its life cycle. There's a new one due for 2022, so probably about another year, 18 months left on this one before the next generation shows up. And that next generation is the one that is going to get Volvo's new level 3 conditionally automated driving system that includes a LiDAR sensor. But that's not here yet. What we have now is, what we've had in other Volvos for a while. So this is the plug-in hybrid, 415 horsepower total from the 2-liter 4-cylinder engine in the front with both a supercharger and a turbocharger, putting out 315 horsepower, and then a 100 horsepower electric motor on the rear axle and a big battery down the middle of it. And one of the things I did this time is, I fully charged it up and then took it out and did a drive cycle, a mix of urban, suburban, rural driving, a little bit of highway in there, to see how many electric-only miles I could get out of it. One of the modes you can put it in is there's multiple drive modes. You can put it in sport or normal or what they call pure mode, which forces it into EV mode.
So they say you're going to get, oh, Jesus, it's in metric. It's 40 kilometers, whatever that was that, like 30-something miles?
Let's see. It's
times
it's
0.6,
officially
right?
rated at
Says 24
18
miles. 18
The
miles.
EPA, 18 miles on the window sticker. So that's the official EPA rating. I actually got 22 miles out of it.
Okay, so that's actually that's a little closer, because 40 kilometers is 24 miles, right? By 0.6. So
yeah, well, I think that 40 kilometers is the WLTP number, so that's the European test value.
Well, so then you actually
did a little bit higher.
You did a lot better than you should have.
Yeah, no, I did great. And my overall average fuel economy for the week was like 99 miles per gallon, because basically every time I came home I plugged it in.
And a 400 and something horsepower.
Yeah, and then but I mean most of the time I wasn't using the 400 horsepower because you don't really need it most of the time.
Yeah.
So this thing, if you plug it in all the time, for most of your, driving around town to go to the grocery store, run whatever errands, you're going to be able to run it, on electricity almost all the time, unless you really stomp on the gas pedal, and, then the engine will come on and you'll get plenty of performance too. But, it's a nice powertrain, and this is the same powertrain that they have in the V60 plug-in hybrid, and the S60, and the XC60, and the S90 and the V90. So they've basically got this across all of the 60 and 90 series models.
Well, it's it's like Volvo decided to take a look at its classic formula, where they had very distinctive styling and they had one engine.
Yeah.
And they used it in everything.
And that's what they have to. I mean, everything that Volvo builds right now, still is built around one engine, one 2-liter 4-cylinder engine that they sell either with a turbocharger or a bigger turbocharger or a turbo and a supercharger, or a turbo supercharger and a hybrid. So those are your options now. Although just this week they just started production of the XC40 Recharge, which is the battery electric version. So that's going to be coming soon.
Well, and Geely just introduced a vehicle that has their newest their newest corporate architecture. So I expect that we're going to get Volvos on that architecture at some point.
Yeah, or at least Polestars. We'll probably get Volvos at some point as well. The next generation, the SPA2 architecture, which is the next generation of what's under the 60 and 90 series vehicles, that will have an option for an all-electric version. But there's also a dedicated EV platform that they've developed, which they'll be using for vehicles like upcoming Polestars. Like they also showed a concept in Beijing last week called the Polestar Precept,
right.
And said that's going to be coming to production in I think about 2 years. So there's lots of electrification, lots more electrification coming from Volvo Car Group over the next several years, which is in line. Excuse me, which is in line with what Volvo announced a couple of years ago when they said, from 2020 onwards, all of their vehicles would have electrification. What they actually wrote in the press release was that they were going all electric, which was not true.
Right. That's
what they actually meant was they're going all electrified, because as a standard going forward, all their models are going to have a 48-volt mild hybrid as the minimum, and then they'll have plug-in hybrids and battery electrics on top of that,
which I think is good. And the new one that I was talking about with Geely is the SEA architecture, whatever that stands for, the Sustainable Experience Architecture.
And I think that's what they're using for the Precept and other EV models going forward.
But I think it's good that they're going to actually have everything get a hybrid, because one of my observations with the turbo 2-liter is, well, it's a fine enough engine and it's generally powerful enough. it doesn't sound or feel as premium as it could. And so having a hybrid and the electric motor to give you that torque means you're going to have to work the engine a little less hard, and I think that will improve the character of the cars by making them feel a little bit more confident from stops and stuff like that.
Yeah, and with the plug-in hybrids, you definitely get a lot of that because it'll always launch electrically, and then the engine comes in, so the engine's not working as hard. So even when the charge is depleted, when you've just got hybrid charge in the battery, it's still going to launch electrically, and then the engine comes in, unless you really stomp on it, in which case it all comes on at the same time. But the XC90 I had was the base price for the plug-in hybrid is $67,500.
That's not terrible. You compare that to what, like an X5? It's within range.
It's not unreasonable, But then when you start adding on all the options, like this one was an Inscription, that had the really nice seats and 20-inch wheels and park assist and wood, walnut inlays in the dashboard, and that's $6,300 for the Inscription package. The advanced package is another $2,500 for the LED headlights with active bending in the corners, and the heads-up display and the 360 surround camera, and then another $3,000 for the luxury package to get the heated rear seats and the heated steering wheel, which of course you want, especially in the wintertime. And the massaging seats. Love the massaging seats. So all together, it came to $86,790 delivered. So
still not terrible when you consider the amount of luxury you get.
When you consider the luxury you get, and if you compare it to a plug-in hybrid X5, or actually, I guess not sure. I think it might even be closer to an X7 because this is a 3-row, like the X7. You're going to be paying at least that much, for BMW or a Mercedes plug-in hybrid, 3-row SUV as well. So it's not, it's not cheap, but it's in line with the rest of the segment. It's definitely comparable. For that kind of money, I think I might just be more inclined to go with the Aviator Grand Touring instead.
So I did drive an Aviator, and I can't remember whether I talked about it on the show or not.
You did last time, yeah.
Man, I was impressed with that thing.
Yeah.
And definitely, that was one of my comments, was like, for the same kind of money, the Lincoln actually, to me, felt a lot more premium than the Volvo. And the Volvo is nicely designed, and it's comfortable, and it does have a lot of nice features, but the Lincoln, whatever they managed to do, that thing just feels really special.
It does. So, and that's going to run you, especially a Black Label Grand Touring is going to be about 87, 88 grand. So it's about the same price. And, it's definitely more, it feels more upscale than this one does.
So how was my consistent complaint about the XC90 is that SPA platform just doesn't seem to have a very plush ride. How was this one? Maybe I just haven't sampled it.
I wouldn't call it plush, but this one was also, with the Inscription package, you're on 20-inch wheels, and I think that always hurts ride. So it's been a long time since I drove one, that was a non-Inscription, one of the lower trim levels with the 18s or even 19-inch wheels, But I suspect some of the inputs felt a little sharp, like there wasn't enough compliance in the sidewalls. Overall it was great, it was comfortable, but I certainly wouldn't call it plush.
See, that's one of the things that the Lincoln managed to do, was it had the one that I drove had the air suspension, and so it could get plush.
It gives you that option of picking a softer setting, or tightening it up, when you want to drive more aggressively, and that adaptability that you get with that suspension system, I think is definitely an advantage.
Yeah, So, and we're talking about the XC90 that's at the end of its life cycle, essentially. And so I expect that's going to improve. So then the next one will have to be better.
Yeah, and I'm sure it will be.
I mean, it's a 5-6-year-old product now. It came out in 15, right? So
yeah, I think so. Yeah, 15.
It's getting up there in age.
Yeah. And this one, this had the pilot assist system on there, which I tried again, and it's okay. It's definitely gotten better over the years. Each time I've tried it, it's a little more confident. It does a little better job of staying centered in the lane. It's absolutely not a system that you can do hands off. Not in any way, shape, or form. But it does okay. As a really nice driver assist system.
Yeah, it's pretty good. I like it in stop and go. It's pretty well done for that.
Yeah, it's great for that. And I did do most of the driving around town with that. I didn't really go any long distances on the highway with it, so it works really well in those kinds of conditions. Census, we've beat that one to death over the years. It's.
I was going to say, how was Census?
It's going away.
Yeah.
The Polestar 2 is the first one to get the new Android Automotive based system, and then the new generation XC90 and everything else that follows is going to get that as well.
It's coming. It'll be here, and we'll have a new thing to complain about.
Yeah. We always find something to complain about.
Yeah, I mean, the XC90 is it's a really well done choice for its segment. It still is, and I still think it looks fantastic.
Oh yeah, no, I mean the design, it's one of those designs that holds up really well. It's not a fussy design. It's very clean. But it's got some really nice details in it, that is spread across the rest of the lineup. I still like the way they've done, that they did with the headlights. The Thor's hammer signature lighting in the headlights. I think that's still a very cool touch that works, and it's distinctly Volvo.
Yeah, yeah. All right.
What about you?
Well, I got to try the Mazda CX-30, which I was really excited about because in the past you've driven one, and your take on it was that it replaces the CX-3, which is good, but the CX-30 just slots right in between the CX-3 and the CX-5, and it's just modern Mazdas are drivers' cars. Even this was a driver's car. It surprised me. I had to go into the office, which is about 45 miles away, and so on the way back I have to do a couple of highway interchanges, and there's one of them that's a decreasing radius turn.
I love those.
And you shut off traction control, and you're just like, I'm just gonna see how little braking I can do. And the CX-30, it doesn't matter what chassis layout it is, too. If it's a good chassis, you'll be able to do this where, yes, it's going to understeer, but then you can just balance it right on the understeer, and the CX-30 did that no problem. We got around it, and I was very pleased.
Well, the thing that the CX-30 and all the other newer Mazdas have is that G vectoring system.
Yeah, it works.
Which it's using the accelerometer in the car, and steering angle and various other sensors, and it's detecting when you're going through curves like that, and basically it automatically backs off the engine torque a little bit, which has the effect of creating some weight transfer onto the front wheels. It's essentially doing automatic trail braking for you without actually using the brakes.
Which is good because I suck at trail braking.
Yeah. And it does it really, really well and seamlessly. I mean, you can feel it, just tracking wherever, exactly where you want it to go without it actually feeling like it's doing anything.
Yeah, it's not oppressive. It's not magic. I mean, if you overcook a turn, you're going off the side of the road.
Oh yeah. I mean, physics is still physics.
Right.
When I was working on ABS systems, one of our, the general rule of thumb was, Newton was right. Physics ultimately wins over everything else.
Yeah. And with understeer, like, that just means, like, understeer is safe because it plows nose first. So you get all that front impact protection. I was not able to test that, so that's a good thing, actually. But I was really pleased with just how it'll, you'll get some of the body roll because Mazda's not, they know how to tune the suspension so you get that sensation of the car digging in. It'll take a set. It'll carve around that decreasing radius turn and where the exact limit of adhesion is, and so where to sort of go, steer into it and out of it, and just that's the kind of entertainment you can do without having to go fast. And so that's really pleasant because a lot of cars these days, like that Volvo you just had, its limits are too high, and I'm sure it would be unhappy if you tried to do that. But with large wheels and big tires, and there's just too much grip, and you can't do that sort of thing without really being too out of control. So I appreciate that. I appreciate a car that feels elemental that way. And there was the real steering feel. It rode really well. It wasn't harsh. It had a really nice balance of sort of suppleness and adhesion, I guess, or just control. And it looks great. It was that nice, like, crystal red color.
Oh, yeah. The soul crystal red, yeah. That's the best color.
It looks so good. I don't know whether... I think it's like a base coat and then a tinted clear or something, too. I don't know exactly what they do to get that particular color, but it's very distinctive. And it had a light tan seats and stuff. So it really looked and felt premium. And it drove sporty. It drove like BMWs used to, and I hate to use that kind of cliche, but it really does. It feels like it has that soul of a premium sort of sporty car, or just like a performance mindset to it in some way. And it's not really all that fast. It doesn't have a turbo yet. It's getting the turbo, and my initial thought was, well, it needs it. And then I thought about it, and I was like, it's going to be fine with or without it. It's not exactly slow without the turbo, but you do wind up sort of actively planning your moves a little bit sometimes.
It's 185 horsepower. It's adequate.
Yeah, it's adequate, and it's really like it's enough to get in trouble. I worry that the turbo is going to have just that much more punch, and it's going to allow you to kind of upset the balance of the car. Because turbo power delivery is nonlinear, and the nice thing about this engine is that it's linear. If you want the power, you wring its neck. If you're in the middle of a turn and you put your foot down with a turbo, especially the turbos now where they spool so quick, all of a sudden you've got too much torque and you're boiling the inside tire. Whereas a not naturally aspirated engine, you learn by feel and by hearing where that power is going to come. So it's again, if you're actively driving, you don't necessarily need it, but for the way most people drive, they're going to really appreciate the off the line torque and the extra performance of the turbo. And I don't think it's going to hurt CX-30. It might make it a little bit more of a challenge to drive in a irresponsible manner.
Well, the turbo is the same engine that they have in the Mazda 6, the 2.5 liter turbo. So it's 250 horsepower, and it's great in the 6. I've driven it a couple of times now, and it's a really fantastic engine. Very, very smooth and seamless. Lots of good low end or good torque all the way through, and I think with all wheel drive on the CX-30, and it's also coming to the Mazda 3 with all-wheel drive in those models. I think it'll be fine. I don't anticipate any issues with it.
Yeah, I think I think it's going to make it have a good impression in the market. When you consider all of its competition probably offers something that feels punchy too, they kind of can't not they can't omit it. I think it compares, the CX-30 compares with the Escape, right? Or is it slightly smaller?
No, it's smaller.
Okay. So Ford doesn't have anything that compares to it.
Well, I mean, the only thing Ford's got that's close in size to that is the EcoSport, and it really is, there's no comparison. It's not even in the same class.
No, it's definitely not. But the EcoSport is one of those other ones that's surprising. I really like to throw that thing around by the scruff of its neck too. It's definitely not a premium feeling product.
No, not at all.
But it's surprisingly fun to fling around. So yeah, but it's a little bit on the smaller side than that, and it'll have some more power. So I think it's going to occupy a niche in the market, and it feels really nice. It's just a non-premium feel, which like that's a thing, you know. You don't have to go to a luxury brand to get the luxury features. It makes a good impression in the trim that I had it in, and it wasn't super expensive. It was in the 30s, but not high 30s. And
yeah, I mean, it really doesn't get much over 30 fully loaded.
Yeah, and it's just pretty fully loaded. I'm not a huge fan of their infotainment. I don't mind the remote controller knob. That's fine. I just think that there's too many menus, too many clicks, and they need to sort of flatten out that structure. And the control wheel is fine. That works really well. It's just the actual software and the user interface is kind of tedious, and that makes it confusing to get what you want and go back and forth. So they got some work to do there, but the rest of the car is lovely. It's a very good size. We had trying to think if we had everybody in it or not, but at least in my use, there were no complaints about it feeling cramped, and just everything feels good and looks good. The engine, when you are sort of wringing its neck, it's a really classic Japanese 4-cylinder. It's a smooth, good sounding engine, so you don't mind revving it out. Where some engines don't sound all that pleasant,
right?
When you're doing
it's not a CVT, which also helps.
Right, that helps.
6-speed, yeah.
It's a really good little compact CUV, and I kind of, it doesn't matter that it's a CUV, it's still fun to drive, so, and that's where we're at. Like, we're not going to stop losing sedans for crossovers.
Yeah.
Like, might as well just embrace it.
It's basically a Mazda 3 hatchback that's been lifted a couple inches.
Yeah, and so come on, how can you deny that? It's a good time. And so they took that one away, and they gave me a Lexus ES350 F-Sport, which that's another one that, the common complaint about the ES350 and Lexus, obviously, in general, is that the cars were a little sleepy and not really all that capable in a performance sense, or they just didn't like to be hustled. This was a little different. It doesn't mind being hustled. The F-Sport has a little stiffer suspension, a little more aggressive look, and it actually was a really good-looking car. It's comfortable. It has sportier seats, and it was dark blue metallic on the outside and red leather. So I mean, that's a nice combo. It's hard not to enjoy that. It has all of the elements kind of together, and it has that 3.5 liter V6 that snarls real nicely and has plenty of power. They've done enough on this to make it feel appropriately aggressive, and so I was surprised by that. The expected traits are still there. It's still very quiet and refined, but there's like that little bit of not too much. You kind of hear the whir of the machinery, which I appreciated that. You can hear the engine a little bit more than you might think you would. And it's almost like a throwback. Like there's just this little guttural sound from the V6, and it kind of thrums through the steering. I'm not saying the steering column shakes or anything. It's a solid platform. But so I was either I'm getting old or they did a really good job on the ES350 this time around.
Well, I wouldn't rule out that both of those are true.
That's true. I mean, it's a big city. It's based on. It's not Camry now, right? It's Avalon. Like it's all kind of the same thing, but it's bigger.
Yeah, I mean, Camry and Avalon, are both, variations of the TNGA platform. The larger they're at the larger end of that platform architecture.
Yeah, and so no problem with the room in the back seat. It was spacious, big trunk. The TNGA has always kind of impressed me. There were a couple of sort of creaks and not rattles, but it makes a little bit of noise when you're driving it, trying to exploit that performance from the big wheels and the stiffer suspension, sportier tires. I don't know that I would say that they all do that. This is a press car.
Yeah.
So they tend to sometimes get beaten.
No.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen.
And I think too, it's one of those cars that around town, it has the right mix of performance and tuning. I think if you were to try this on a track day, you'd quickly find that it's not the car for that. It's going to fall apart in terms of its performance. But it's one of those cars that on the street feels really good. Because there were a couple of times where I found the limits, and I was like, "Oh, okay, there we go." So it's really good up until the limit, and then all of a sudden you have found them. It's not scary, but it's just it sometimes it fools you a little bit, I guess. To just like, because it looks so aggressive, and it gives off these vibes like I'm a driving machine. And then you attempt it and you're like, oh nope, there it is. There's the understeer. We're gonna be careful here. But yeah, it's a pleasant car that has a little bit of an edge to it. So it's hard to really complain about the ES350. It's very luxurious. It's very well done. The infotainment still sucks. It did have Apple CarPlay, so that was a plus. But it's not. Their infotainment's not that well done, and I hope that I've been giving Toyota a pass on this for a couple of years now, saying I'm sure they're working on it. So damn it, they have to be done working on it now. They have to upgrade this stuff.
It's not good. Does the ES have the trackpad or
yes?
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't find the trackpad terrible, but it's not. It's not as good as the little mouse thing, the little joystick they used to have, because you can't really orient yourself on it. So there's wasted motion there, and it's, when you're driving, you're trying to move the stupid highlight around to what you want, and you miss it, and there's like extra clicks. There's like 3 extra.
Yeah, I always thought that little mouse stubby joystick thing was a lot more precise control than what you get out of this trackpad.
Yeah, and then just the fact that, like, so for example, I wanted to turn the AC off, and so you have to click into climate, and then you can see AC and you can see that it's on, but you can't select it because you have to actually hit the bottom. There's a hard button on the bottom of the trackpad. You have to hit that, and then it brings up a sub menu, which you then can select.
You see, that's exactly wrong.
And I was like, "What? Why would you do that?"
If you want to turn off AC, there should be a physical button that you press off.
Yeah,
that's it.
And well, I understand here too. Like, they just want it to default to auto, and I get that, but
yeah, but even in most other cars, even if you have automatic climate control, there's usually one button that turns everything off, turns off the AC, the fan, everything.
I probably could have turned it off.
You turn it on.
But I just wanted to shut the air conditioner off. I wanted the vents still blowing. Like, it's just, I'm not sure what the decision-making process is with this stuff, but it just does. I don't get it either. Like, why do I need to press 3 things just to do one function? Like, that's, to me, it's inexplicable. I can't understand why it's so difficult to use. And then just to go back and forth, there's multiple. It has a decent sized screen, but you can get confused about what you're actually trying to select. And so I wound up having like 2 different nav screens up, the map and the map, and it was like, what the hell?
Yeah, I've struggled with that system on multiple Lexi, and it's just not a good design.
No, and like I'm sure you could probably use the underlying hardware and software, but you've got to clean up the user interface and make it better, because it's just not great to use, and that's, you know, these days that's a real selling feature of a car, especially a premium car like this. Like, somebody's gonna try that car out, they're gonna test drive it, they're gonna plug in their device, it should come up, it should be easy to use, it should be easy to get the functions that you want. And I know that at this end of the market too, you set everything up to your preferences, and then it becomes an extension of your other devices too. So the car just knows what you want and does it. It's not easy to do that here. Some cars it's really easy to set them up. This one is not. So, but to drive it was fine. It was I appreciated the driving. That 3.5 liter V6 and the automatic transmission that they have on that, man, Toyota does a good powertrain.
They do. They do that well.
Well, let's keep talking about powertrain. Because the saddest news I've heard in a long time is that the Ford Mustang GT350. Did I get all the names? There's a Shelby GT350.
Shelby GT350.
Okay, so the Shelby GT350. It's ending production. So that Voodoo V8 with the flat plane crank is done. There's one final edition you drove. So did you try out the Heritage Edition?
We did. They brought out some Heritage Editions last week, and they did a little local drive program here near Ann Arbor over a couple of days, and got a chance to spend about 2.5 hours just tooling around in that thing, and it's glorious.
I know. I love that car.
You know, when back in 2013, I was actually working for an agency that was supporting Ford Communications, and you know, I actually wrote the press kit for the 2015 Mustang and most of the 50th anniversary of Mustang press materials over the course of 2013 and the early part of 2014 before I left there and took my current job. And at somewhere around mid 2013. Actually, in early 13, I had been in the design studio for what they call an immersion, where they had a group of us, and we went through a bunch of different stuff, getting a deep dive on the new car, on the 2015 car. And one of the things in the studio was the clay model of the GT350.
Don't pay attention to that. Pay no attention.
No. I mean, they told us what it was, and they didn't get any details at the time. And later on, talking to somebody in engineering, I learned what was special about the GT350. Up to that point, for the previous decade, they had been doing GT500s with a supercharged V8, which they now have again. But the GT350 was going to have a naturally aspirated V8. And at the time, I didn't know that it was going to be a flat plane crank V8. And a couple months later, I was out on Oakwood Boulevard across the street from the test track, the Dearborn Development Center, which is Ford's main proving grounds. And I saw a prototype Mustang coming out of the gate. And then I heard it as it was accelerating away. And it's like, what the... I had never heard a Mustang sound like that before.
Right.
And then when I sat down with the engineers at what was at the time still SVT, later renamed to Ford Performance, I learned all about what they had done on that engine. And there was a flat plane crank, 5.2 liter, and learned that it had a red line of 8,250 RPM. Way higher than any Mustang ever.
I know that was the thing when I drove it. I was like, because what a muscle car sounds like when it's time to shift. Yeah. But then you realize, like, I'm not anywhere
this thing just
near
keeps
shifting.
on going.
Yeah, it just feels so weird because it revs like a VTEC Honda.
Exactly.
And it does not sound like one, though.
No. And it's funny, there are other flat plane crank V8s, usually in high performance European cars.
Yeah, the M3 had one. What was it, the E46 M3 or E90? E90 M3 had one, I think.
Is it the E90? The E92 M3 had a flat plane crank V8. And so, they tend to have a very distinctive sound that's quite unlike a typical V8 engine. Although the one in the Mustang, the Voodoo V8 as they called it, was a little bit different from those because it had a different firing order from what you typically get on most flat plane crank V8s, and so it still has a little bit of that classic, big V8 rumble mixed in with that higher pitched sound from revving, and it just sounds amazing. And this is the thing, I know we're going electric, everything's going to be electric, and they're going to be faster than this thing. I mean, hell, the Mustang Mach-E GT is going to be faster than a GT350, from 0 to 60 and quarter mile.
And we'll talk about that, right?
But it's not the same.
It doesn't matter.
You miss that visceral feeling of the sound and the vibration. I mean, V8s are smooth, but they're still at idle. They have that little bit of
that one little
first
bump.
order. Yeah, that little rumble, and it feels like it's alive. And you don't get that from EVs. I remember back in 2008 when I first drove the Tesla Roadster for the first time, and the same thing. It's incredibly fast and great handling and everything, but it's quiet and it's like something's missing.
Yeah.
And you don't want a synthetic sound, or you don't want a synthesized version of a naturally aspirated engine in that case, I don't think. But
no, I like the wail. I like to hear the wail of the engine and not the engine, the motor, the inverter, all of that hardware, and you get to hear the gearbox too. So I think they could just go straight cut gears.
Yeah,
they make a shitload of noise.
and that's what they do on the Formula E race cars.
Oh, they straight cut them?
They're straight cut gears. That's what makes the Formula E cars sound so cool. They sound like TIE fighters.
Yeah, they just
Star
wail.
Wars.
Yeah.
And they actually sound really cool.
Yeah.
But you don't usually get that in street cars. But anyway, the GT350 is coming to an end. They're in production now with the GT500. The 350 is done this week. They should be building out the last of them. The last of them should be rolling off the line in Flat Rock either this week or early next week. They'll finish up the last handful of them. And this last batch that they built are what they call the Heritage Edition. They decided, they were coming to the end of the line. They wanted to do the same livery that was on the original GT350s back in 1964, which was Wimbledon white. The same kind of slightly off-white shade that they had as kind of the standard color on the regular Mustangs at the time, and with these guardsman blue stripes over the top and along the rocker panels. And the thing is, Ford wanted to replicate that guardsman blue. They knew how to do Wimbledon white because they've done that on various special edition Mustangs over the years, including the 2015 50th anniversary edition. But they never actually had painted guardsman blue because those were painted at Shelby American out in California, out in Venice, when they were being built.
Yeah, who knows what was in that paint?
Ford had no paint master for it. But they went out to the Shelby archives in Las Vegas at Shelby American, and they actually found the paint master for guardsman blue, and they brought it back to Michigan, and they managed to get it matched. They got a match for it, and the stripes on the GT350 are actually vinyl. They're not painted on. So the company, their supplier for those stripes, they worked with them and went through a few iterations and finally got a perfect match of the stripes with the paint master. And they actually brought out a 65 GT350, had it parked next to it, and you can see that it was the same color. So the other main thing that they changed on the Heritage Edition is the Cobra badges on the tail, the grill, and on the instrument panel. Traditionally, those are red. On all the other GT350s, they've been red. For this one, they actually made them guardsman blue, so it matches the stripes. But other than that, it's basically standard GT350, and they were available either as base GT350 or the 350R. I actually got to drive a 350R for a couple hours, which is great because that's got the carbon fiber wheels on it and the really nice Recaro seats and everything.
Yeah, the one I drove was a 350R, I think, and it's been a few years. That's the only press car I've driven that I had somebody pull up to me at a light and ask me to rev it up. And of course, I had it in completely open, as open as you can get mode, so you could hear the thing. And I was like, absolutely, because it sounds so good. God, I love that car.
if you ever have a chance to drive a GT350, what you need to do is take it in a parking garage, or drive under a stone railroad bridge, like I did a couple of times. The place where we're driving, there's this old stone railroad bridge, and really rev the shit out of it as you're going under this, and just feel that echo off the stones,
and the snaps or drive
it
cracks.
through a tunnel.
It'll overrun.
It's fabulous.
It's one of those cars, and I'm sad that it's going away. I understand why it is, and I'm sure the GT500 is performance-wise better, but I'm just
it's faster.
Yeah, faster isn't everything.
I wouldn't. That's what I was about to say. I don't know that I would necessarily say it's better because it's also heavier.
Yeah,
it's quite a bit heavier. The GT500 is by far the best GT500 they've ever built. Unlike the past, this is the first one with the independent suspension and everything, and it's definitely a better handling car. But it is like 400 pounds heavier than the GT350R.
Yeah, that's a lot.
The 350R, even with those massive brakes that are on it, is 3,700 pounds, and the GT500 is about 4,100 pounds.
Woo! That's 4,100 pounds. That's only a couple hundred pounds lighter than our Grand Cherokee.
Yeah.
Which I do not want to drive around like that.
But if you put a big supercharged V8 in that Grand Cherokee, the Trackhawk, you're up closer to 5,000 pounds too.
Yeah, absolutely. It's probably more than that, right?
Yeah.
With all the other stuff they put in there, but that's the thing though. Like the numbers are just they're pointless because it's the way that car it's the way it shakes. Honestly, it just has that heartbeat. Everything sort of sympathetically vibrates with that engine, and the way it sounds and everything is just it makes it an experience. And the lighter weight with 3,700 pounds is not exactly light, but these days it's fine. But the way it's going to handle and the way you can manage the mass and sort of throw it around a little bit like that, it was a sports car, not a Mustang. You know what I mean? Like it had finally sort of really come into its own. It was just enough engine, and just enough adhesion, and more chassis than engine, I think, which was kind of the flip side of Mustangs for so long.
Right. Well, and that was always the balance, back in the 60s between the 350 and the 500. The 350 was the small block engine that was the car that was designed to go SCCA road racing.
Yeah. And
won a bunch of championships. The 500 was the drag car. That's the one you took to the strip, and that eventually evolved, into the Cobra Jet, which was the pure, factory drag racing car.
Yeah.
So, those were the 500s were the big blocks back in the 60s.
Yeah, I mean, think about that. A Falcon with an FE big block in it. Like, that's just not a car that, like, there's no way to make that actually handle very well.
No, and they didn't. They were terrible. But they could go in a straight line like nothing else.
Fine. Not my thing.
But compared to today's GT500s, it was a dog.
Well, yeah.
Even with that big block, it was only about in SA gross horsepower, probably somewhere around between 350 and 375 horsepower.
Yeah, but at most it weighed like 3,000 pounds too. Like the Falcon.
Those big blocks are pretty heavy.
The big block was
those were
heavy.
cast iron blocks.
Yeah, but the rest of the car was like 13 pounds. There was nothing to them. Yeah. I think so. Even though like I almost want one of the old ones with the big block in it, even though it's going to be so terrible, just because it's going to be terrifying. And so you'll at least feel
it's terrifying, all right. I drove one in December when I was out in Vegas for the GT500 drive. They had a 68 GT500 out there that Haggerty brought out. And, it looked great, but, compared to driving a modern car, it was terrible. I mean, all kinds of slop in the steering wheel and halfway through the brake pedal travel before much of anything happens. And,
and it's all drums.
Yeah. No, it had discs on the front.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's, but that's sort of the thing. Like, you get all this cold competence. And I feel like the GT350 had that balance of. Like,
it still had a bit of raw edge to it.
Yeah, and I like that in a car.
But it's not all bad. I mean, in the spring they're going to have the Mach 1 is going to be available, which is not quite a 350. It kind of cuts kind of a blend between a GT and a GT350. So it has the regular 5-liter cross-plane crank V8, but it's up to I think 485 or 490 horsepower, and it doesn't quite have the look of the GT350, but it'll still be plenty of fun.
Can we really complain about the Mustang? No. Like, we're splitting hairs here, and yes, it's a very special car. We very much liked the engine. It's neat. There's not really much to complain about with the cross-plane V8 or anything like that. Is that still the Coyote? It's the Coyote, right? Like
it's based on the Coyote block, but it's a modified version of the block. Bigger bores, and it has the plasma coated bores on it, like the GT500s do. So instead of steel liners in there, it's aluminum liners with a plasma coating on there to give it the durability it needs to rev to 8,250 RPM.
Yeah, that's a good time. So I think it's more of just like a thank you, Ford, for for building it for a couple of years. And I honestly don't know how it's sold. Like, that might be the other thing too. Is like they're like, we're done losing money on this thing.
No, I don't think they lost money on it. They sold several thousand a year over its run, which was good. And one of the things that was explained to me was back in 2007 when they relaunched the GT500. Prior to that, they had the SVT Cobra. So on the S197 Mustangs, the old the previous generation, they had, or rather on the SN95s. The GT500 was the S197. On the SN95s, it was called the supercharged high-end version was just the SVT Cobra. And one of the things that they learned from that program is, while people liked them, they didn't actually get any extra profit margin on them. It was like a couple $100 extra profit margin on them versus selling a GT. So they were at a higher price point, but the gap between the cost and what the revenue was, was not much different. One of the things they learned was when they put a Shelby badge on it, they could charge a lot more money. People would pay a lot more money for the same car with a Shelby badge.
Shelby noticed that too.
Oh yeah. Oh, he did. Yeah. And so, they sell those at a much higher profit margin than they do, standard Mustangs. So they certainly made money on it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, good for them. It's not like it's bad for us anyway. They're still coming out with cool stuff.
Yeah.
I think our point with the GT350, GT500 conversation was that, like, the numbers are they're not as material as you would think. And with electric vehicles, I think that one of the things that every time there's a new electric vehicle out there, new EV comes out, A, it's a luxury car, and B, they talk about how scorchingly quick it gets to 60 miles an hour. Like, this one does it in like a half a second. It's such nonsense. The numbers don't matter when to 60. Like, we've proven that yes, they have lots and lots of torque and they can get it to the ground very effectively. So what?
My point exactly. I wrote a post on our company blog at guidehouseinsights.com, and it's gotten so ridiculous. With something like the GT350, I wasn't driving it anywhere near its limits, and I still had a ball with it. It didn't need to be as powerful as it was. It was 525 horsepower. It didn't need to be that powerful. Just my personal car, my Miata, certainly nowhere near that. It was like 116 horsepower when it was new 30 years ago. Who knows what it is now? I recently found my old performance timer and stuck it on there and went out and did some 0 to 60 runs, and it was about 9.5 seconds.
That's plenty.
It doesn't matter because it's so much fun to drive. EVs, starting with the Tesla Roadster, one of the things that Tesla did with the Roadster was demonstrate that EVs could be fun. They didn't have to be, this, slow appliance, a golf cart. They proved that it could be an exciting car. And the Roadster, did 0 to 60 in 4 seconds.
4 seconds to 60 is like, that's Corvette C6 fast. That's fast.
Yeah, it's really fast. So, what we're seeing now, with some of these high-end EVs is just getting absurd. We talked a couple weeks ago about Lucid and the launch of the Lucid Air. And at the time, they said one of the things they were claiming was, this thing would go run a quarter mile in 9.9 seconds. Which is, that's Dodge Demon numbers. What? For a luxury 4-door sedan.
Somebody's just going to plow that into like a Starbucks.
Yeah.
So,
and we've been seeing, from Tesla for several years now with the Model S and the Model X and the Y, and we've seen Faraday Future claiming that they're quicker, getting into like the low 2-second range, 0 to 60. That is just ridiculously fast. We don't need cars that go that fast, unless you're planning to take these things to a track. And that's the only place where you should be using that kind of performance is on a track. There's no way you should be accelerating that fast on public streets. It's totally irresponsible. And I'm somebody that likes to drive fast, and I don't do that kind of nonsense especially if there's anybody around. We don't need EVs to be that fast. I remember back in the late 80s, early 90s, there was a controversy in Europe because a lot of high-end German cars, were getting, they were approaching top speeds of 200 miles an hour, when they had cars like the original AMG Hammer and some of these other ones. And the German government actually threatened to impose speed limits on all of the Autobahn. And so the industry actually came together and said, okay, look, don't do that. Don't do the speed limits on the Autobahn. We will voluntarily agree to limit the top speed of our cars to 155 miles an hour, 250 kilometers per hour.
And they did until you took it to somebody like AMG, which then would remove the speed limit.
Yeah. But, they at least did something.
Yeah.
And I think it's time, for EV makers, now, last week at the Tesla Battery Day, Musk talked about, the Model S Plaid, which is going to be a 3-motor version of the Model S. There's also a 3-motor version of the Lucid Air. They were saying they just the day before, or a couple of days before Battery Day, they took it to Laguna Seca and set a record for a 4-door production intent car, and did quarter mile in 9.2 seconds with this thing. Jesus. And then the Model S Plaid went even faster. Okay, you've made your point. These things are faster than we could make any production internal combustion cars. Frankly, I don't think we should be making internal combustion cars that fast either. 1,500 horsepower Bugatti Chirons is it's stupid. It's idiotic. And I think that we need to back off and stop putting so much emphasis on the acceleration performance of these things, because the reality is most drivers cannot handle that level of performance. They
quite honestly,
the training.
It's still rare for a car to be that quick. I wouldn't want to try to exploit that kind of performance. And you know, I've driven a lot of high performance cars. 0 to 60 that fast is like that's fast, and you know, something that's going to be able to get up to 130, 140 miles an hour without much of a problem. That's really fast.
Yeah.
And unless you do it a lot, you do not have enough practice to understand how quickly you're on top of things, how tiny your inputs need to be to not upset the car. Like, no, don't do it.
Yeah. And it's, you know, it's only getting worse. I mean, Lotus is about to launch the production version of the Avaya, their first electric car. You know, they've been going through final validation testing recently. And this, you know, they're only going to build 130 of these, and they're going to cost $2 million. And it's got 2,000 horsepower. That's why?
Fine.
Why?
I mean, you know, so here's the thing
in the case of the Avaya, most of those are going to end up being garage queens anyway. They're never going to get driven.
Which is a shame.
But yeah,
because I'm sure they're actually going to drive really well because they're a Lotus.
Yeah.
The thing that I just come back to is like, these are about energy efficiency, but they're not really. Like, I think it's great that it's been proven that they can be fun, they can be desirable, they can be a different niche in the market. Great. All of that is really good because it's created demand and it's created conversation, and these are all good things. But what if you just backed off the performance a little bit? And, well, you know, maybe you could be more efficient.
Yeah. The reality is, certainly, Lucid's done a lot to improve efficiency. Tesla's, doing a lot for efficiency. That's great. But, you're certainly not going to achieve that efficiency when you're using that level of performance.
Right.
To get that, to get 500 miles of range, you're not going to accelerate to 0 to 60 in 2 seconds. You do that, you're going to get closer to 100 miles of range. But, at this point, it's really more about the leaders of these companies. It's a measuring contest,
right.
And I'm not talking about measuring the speed of the vehicles.
Yes, I mean, well, and it takes a certain kind of person. I'm using the word "person's" just staying in for whatever, but it takes a certain kind of person to be the figurehead for one of these companies. Partially because I think the paradigm was set with Tesla, where you have this kind of demagogue at the head of the company. And we've seen some other ways of doing it. The Lucid, for example, is a sort of an all-star team of experienced professionals. But Rivian and Nikola, they both sort of have their own guy at the top, who's sort of.
Well, Nikola's, Trevor Milton's gone now.
But. Well, yeah, that's. I don't know enough about that situation. It just sounds really messy and whatever. But that's the thing. There's an EV company, and then there's the person who's at the top, who is sort of like the mastermind, right? And that needs to go away. Quite honestly, yeah. Because it's more of that hero complex thing, right? Like it's a sort of tech leaning paradigm, like Steve Jobs at Apple, or
the cult of personality.
Yeah, exactly. That's a perfect way to put it. And I'm all set with that. I think a lot of people are. We could just give us good products, and products that don't use a lot of energy in any way. You still have to put the electricity in the batteries. So try to keep as much in the battery for as long as possible. It only holds 3 gallons of gas worth of energy. I mean, come on, try to do a good job with that. So I'd be really curious to see if we said, hey, we're gonna make an EV. It's gonna cost $35,000. It's gonna go 0 to 60 in 9-10 seconds. But it's going to go 500 miles. I think that's something we could probably do or get to pretty easily.
You could even do, faster than that, 0 to 60 in 6 seconds, or even 5 seconds is fine. A Chevy Bolt, will do 0 to 60 in about 6.5 seconds.
That's pretty quick.
And that's quick.
Yeah.
That's plenty quick enough, And for higher end cars, do it in 5 seconds. I think that's not crazy. That's not unreasonable. I think that's perfectly acceptable. Beyond that, and this goes for internal combustion cars too. I think we need to start backing off on some of the performance and focus on other areas.
Yeah, I think actually it goes more for internal combustion cars because you can't, with an EV, it's just kind of like a rheostat. Where like if you're not using it, you're not using it, but you can't really dial back. You can use like cylinder deactivation and stuff on an internal combustion engine and sort of dial it back, but there's no way to make it as efficient as an EV when you're not using all the potential, So yeah, definitely. Like I'm okay with slower cars that are more fun to drive. Make them lighter, make them smaller, make them slower. It's fine. The CX-30. It was not all that fast, but I had a really good time in it. Miata is a perfect example too. So, this episode has been sponsored by Mazda.
They released all the specs finally on the powertrains for the new 2021 F-150, which we'll be driving in early November. They've launched production. They've started production in Dearborn, and about 4 weeks from now, I'll have the first drive of that. And this generation is the first one to have a hybrid powertrain, which for a couple of years now, they've been talking about. They're doing things a little bit different with this hybrid. They're really focusing on people that are using these things as a truck. So the goal was to not sacrifice capability, but to enhance capability while still, maintaining good fuel economy. So it's not designed for, ultimate, fuel economy, but to give you good fuel economy while still being able to tow 12,700 pounds. And have a payload of 2,100 pounds in this thing, which is really impressive. It's slightly less than what you get with the 5-liter V8, which does 13,000 pound towing, or the standard 3.5 liter EcoBoost, which is 14,000 pounds towing. But the PowerBoost, combines the EcoBoost V6 with an electric motor it's Ford's modular hybrid design. So the motor sits in between the engine and the torque converter. Or is it?
It's somewhere.
I can't remember. I can't remember if the torque converter is before or after the electric motor. But anyway, it's in there in the transmission.
That's interesting. I was going to say I would assume it's after it because if you put it before, you've got to drive through. You've got to lose efficiency through the torque converter, right?
Yeah. So it's engine, torque converter, and then electric motor, and then the transmission. And one of the cool features that they have with this is electric power generation from this thing. So the standard with the PowerBoost is 2.4 kilowatt power output to power tools at a work site or anywhere else. Power any electrical equipment that you want. And then the optional upgrade is 7.2 kilowatts, including a 240 volt outlet.
You can run your dryer.
Yeah. Well, you can run your dryer, or for contractors, you can run a welder off of that, or a lot of other equipment. And what this does, because this setup is more efficient compared to a lot of contractors, they will take a gas generator. They'll haul around a gas generator in their truck, take that to a job site, and use that to power their tools and charge up their tools. Those tend to be dirtier. They don't have emission controls on them. They're not as fuel efficient. This is going to be much more fuel efficient. Even if you deplete the battery and you've got the engine running, it's still going to be a cleaner, more efficient setup than running a gas generator.
And it's quiet. Oh my God, it's so much more quieter. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is going to be a pretty impressive setup, for anybody that needs power to power other equipment. And I think that it's going to be a very appealing configuration, and it's only, I think it's like it's less than $2,000 premium over the base, the standard 3.5 liter EcoBoost.
If what I've seen from truck prices holds true lately, though, this is going to be like a $45,000 base price truck. In this
I went through the configurator, because you can actually get this like on the lower, like on the XLT.
Oh, do they have the built-in price up? Is that okay?
Yeah, it's available now, and I went through it. You can actually get the hybrid, for in the low $40,000 range. I think it might even be less than that. Which it's funny, back in the late 2000s, 2007, 8, 9. When GM introduced their two-mode hybrid on their full-size SUVs and on the pickup trucks, at that time that system was a $20,000 price premium.
It was very
really
expensive.
Yeah. Actually, the price premium was not 20. It was about $10,000, but the cost to GM was about $20,000.
GM has this habit of like shooting themselves in the foot with like the Sierra C3 was the same thing, where it had that rear wheel steering, and they eventually like sold them off for less than the price of just the parts to build it, because they're like, yeah, whatever, we can't make money on that thing. So hopefully they do better.
Yeah.
On the next
so this one it should do pretty well. I think it's going to be a popular option for customers that need this kind of capability. Certainly, if you're towing 12,500 pounds with this thing, you're not going to get 23 miles per gallon, which is what it's rated at. But it should still do pretty well. Yeah,
I just like how thoughtful Ford has been with all of their updates to this particular generation. The 2021 F-150 really sounds like Ford is aggressively protecting its biggest moneymaker, which they absolutely should. But they're making really significant, thoughtful improvements that will please the people who use the trucks, in a wide variety of ways. And I saw a hilarious story that to test it, the engineers took like a stove and a bunch of stuff down to like a camping facility or something, and they had all this electrical stuff in the back of the truck, which I thought that's great. That's so there's the contractor use for the upgraded, with the 220 volt and stuff. Is there really a practical use for that for the casual buyer of the F-150? Because there's a lot of those buyers too. Like, what would compel you to buy that?
Probably not.
Yeah.
I would think you're probably. It's if what you're looking for is the best fuel efficiency, you're actually better off with the 2.7 liter EcoBoost. I think that's actually the most. It depends. If you're towing, your best fuel efficiency option is going to be the 3 liter diesel. That's
a good engine. Oh my goodness,
that's a great engine, and it's the one that when you're towing, you're not going to lose all. It's still going to have decent fuel economy even when you're towing. You can tow 10,000 pounds with that and still be getting 25 miles per gallon. Whereas you do that with an EcoBoost V6, and you're getting about 14 or 15 miles per gallon. For just the average person, if you're not towing all the time, if you're doing occasional towing or just hauling stuff in the bed, the 2.7 liter EcoBoost is probably the best option. That's going to get you the best combination of fuel economy and price and affordability and capability. And then the hybrid is really, if you need that really high end towing capability and the power takeoff capability. That's where you're going to get the advantage there.
Yeah, they have a lot of choices. I'm just looking at it now. So the standard engine is a 3.3 liter V6, which I didn't realize they made.
Yeah, that they don't. Those are mostly sold to fleets that want the cheapest possible truck.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Not too many consumers buy those.
And then they've got the Nano, the 2.7, and the 3.5, and it looks like the
2.7's the most popular option.
Yeah, which makes sense. That's such a good engine. It's so punchy and it is pretty efficient. So the hybrid is really like in an XLT, like a crew cab. It's about $45,000 starting price for the hybrid, because it's 42,650 for the crew cab, and it's a 47,145 with the hybrid. So
yeah, you can get an XL with the hybrid.
XL with the hybrid? Okay.
Yeah, for like 43.5.
So it's priced very aggressively. There's so many options in Truckville.
Yeah.
That you can get exactly what you want. So somebody was asking me today too, when is the Super Duty coming? I didn't have an answer other than like, well, we're probably going to ride 2021.
They just did a mid-cycle update on the Super Duties for 2020.
Yeah, it's okay. So if they did a mid-cycle for 2020, then we're probably not going to see them till like 2023 or 24, right?
Yeah, I would think 2023 probably.
Yeah. So I thought they'd been a little bit sooner. I thought we might see them in 21 as 22s, but
no, I think it'd probably be 22 as a 23 model year. Yeah. So late 22, so a couple of years from now.
They're not bad trucks though.
No.
I liked the I had an F-350 a while ago, and it was not gnarly, even though it had
Yeah, and they just got that new 7.3 liter gas engine in the Super Duties, and they still have the 6.7 liter diesel. So yeah.
Trucks are where there's that sort of all the emphasis right now. Everything else is kind of slacked off. So all right, did we have any? We did have some questions from Twitter. Are there any others?
We had a couple of email questions. First one is from Tristan Ollie. Tristan says, big fan of the show. Really enjoy how in-depth you go on the industry as opposed to just talking about 0 to 60 times. Rebecca has been a great addition, and I enjoy the different points of view you bring from your experience in the industry. My question for all of you is, what is the future of the manual transmission with most brands planning to electrify their entire lineups? Every vehicle I've ever owned has been a manual, starting with my 1993 Toyota Celica. Will we see hybrid cars with manuals? Having the fun of a manual with some extra fuel economy sounds like a win. I know the CRZ was available with a manual. Is there a technical reason newer cars could not use a similar setup, or just the market for such a vehicle is too small? Well, Tristan, unfortunately, the answer is there is no future for manual transmissions.
I think, though, because the market is too small.
Yeah, exactly. And really, with electric vehicles, you don't even really need a transmission at all. I mean, most EVs just have a single speed setup, which is nothing more than a reduction gear, to get you down from, the electric motors run at much higher speeds than the wheels need to turn. So you basically just have a reduction gear set on there, which is, essentially just the final drive. So not really a transmission at all. There's a few, like the Porsche Taycan actually has a 2-speed transmission on the rear axle and a single speed on the front axle, which theoretically can get you a little better efficiency, because you can get the motor running more in its sweet spot. But for the most part, you're not going to see manual transmissions with electrics, and even with hybrids. Most hybrids don't even use. The CRZ was like the last hybrid, with a manual. The first generation Insight also offered a manual.
Yeah, well, I think the CRZ was kind of an extension of that integrated motor.
It was, yeah,
and it wasn't awful to drive, but it wasn't great either. It was not sporty, which the CRZ kind of sold itself as something that it wasn't. It's still, it's a fun car. It's a nice curiosity. But yeah, I think that you really just, the manual transmission is a thing from the past. It's fun to drive. It's a thing that, we all take pride in mastering. Although, think about it now. It's not that hard. Because we all mastered it when we were teenagers, right?
There is another thing about manual transmissions as well, and one of the reasons why manufacturers have moved away from them, besides just the lack of demand from consumers, it used to be that manual transmissions would get better fuel economy than automatics, and that's no longer the case with modern automatic transmissions that have 7, 8, 10 gears and electronic controls. Now they manage the engine and the transmission together, and they can really optimize, the operation of the two to maximize fuel economy, at least on, the test cycles. But even real world, you can usually get better fuel economy with a modern automatic transmission than you can with a manual, just because it shifts much more precisely, much faster than you can shift a manual, and it's because it's operating in its sweet spot more of the time. You're just never going to be able to match that with a manual transmission, and that's part of why manufacturers have moved away from them.
Yeah, I mean, manuals are it's a reactive thing, right? Like for the emissions, and that's one of the reasons actually why a modern manual is kind of unpleasant to drive. When we get them in media cars, they're not like the old manuals. There's a lot of electronics going on, and so it's actually kind of hard sometimes to drive certain vehicles with a manual transmission smoothly because it's feathering the throttle for you, it's messing with the clutch, and the emissions need to be so tightly controlled that you can't just dump it into third gear. I mean, you can, but you dump it into third gear and short shift, and it's not like it used to be.
There's a lot of stuff happening between your right foot and the engine, and the cylinders that is out of your control.
Yeah, there's a lot of filter. And so that makes it less pleasant and less rewarding than it used to be. And I mean, I think at the end of the day, we'll probably see transmissions stick around on EVs as we start going for more and more range and efficiency. Like that's a way to achieve that. But Tesla had a problem with the Roadster, right? It was supposed to have a 2-speed gearbox, and they never got that working right. So
they had a tendency to break after about 1,000 miles or so.
Yeah, that's no good. And they're not the only ones. Like it's a tricky thing. A gearbox that can stand up to that kind of torque is electric motors. They can give you all the torque you want.
Instantly.
And that's why you don't really need a transmission so much anymore. So that's it's not a bad thing though, because you wind up with a less complex vehicle, less stuff to break, and less expensive, which goes into the batteries, which are more expensive.
Yeah,
I don't know. So unfortunately, I agree. I think the market for manuals is going away. So hang on to your car, whatever you're driving now. Hang on to it if it has a manual.
All right. Next up, Joshua Brentano is asking, we have 2 young kids, and we're approaching the age where we can start some extended road trips. So it's time for a minivan. Yay! I have 2 questions. We want it fully loaded. What is your recommendation for a fully loaded minivan? I've looked over and over at the offerings from all the manufacturers, and they all seem sort of similar. I feel like I'm always narrowing it down to Honda and Chrysler, but I'm open to your expertise. We may very well be replacing my dad's, question number 2, we may very well be replacing my dad's 3 Series BMW, so it'd be awesome if I could soup it up. I'm assuming he's referring to the minivan. Dad would like it to be fun to drive and cool to look at. LOL. Do any of these makes have any kind of decent aftermarket or performance parts for minivans? Thanks for a fun and informative show, Joshua. So, I mean, there's no longer a whole lot of options for minivans. You're basically down to 4. The Chrysler Pacifica, the Honda Odyssey, Toyota Sienna, which is all new for 2021, and the Kia Sedona, which is also getting a redesign for 2021. Certainly, we haven't tried out the new Sienna yet. I have a feeling that it's going to feel very much like the new Highlander, which is fine. It's certainly not something that I would call sporty or fun, but it's effective. To be honest, I wouldn't call any of these particularly sporty or fun, but they're designed for a task, which is to move people and stuff, and do it very effectively. The Honda, the Odyssey, and the Pacifica are both excellent at doing that job.
I think my pick for like an actual practical family van would be the Pacifica, Because it really does. It comes down to those two, the Odyssey and the Pacifica, because the Sienna's not here yet. And I don't know, it's been forever since I was last into Sedona, but it looks better than it drives.
Yeah. As far as aftermarket stuff, I looked around earlier today and didn't really find any aftermarket performance stuff for any of these.
Yeah, I think anything most things for an Accord would probably fit the Odyssey. And there's some JDM stuff, right? Like there's just some people who modify the Odyssey. I don't think there's any enthusiasm for the Pacifica in the aftermarket at all.
Yeah, Mopar does make a bunch of accessories, appearance-wise for the Pacifica. So you can certainly soup up the looks a little bit, but you're not really going to find any performance stuff for it.
Yeah. I think you don't want it.
Yeah, not in a minivan.
The Odyssey, from what I've observed, hits a midlife crisis around 130,000 miles, where just like there's some expensive stuff that needs fixing on those. I don't know what the Pacifica is like, so you should definitely, if you plan to keep it for a very long time and get all your money out of it, check out sort of the long-term reliability. But try several different sites or whatever, because Consumer Reports, I don't know that enough Consumer Reports readers buy Chryslers. They tend to be very loyal to Toyota and Honda, so I don't know that there's enough data there. So to look around and see what kind of data you might find about sort of long-term ownership experience, and bear that in mind, because what parent wants to be taking a loss on the thing in 3 years when you have college funds to raid?
One thing you might want to consider, since you're probably not going to have any real performance options, is the Pacifica Hybrid, which is a plug-in hybrid with like 32, 33 miles of electric range.
It's awesome.
And for your around town driving, if you plug it in at night, unplug it in the morning, you can basically do most of your driving completely on electricity without ever using any gas. And then when it's time for those road trips, and are you really sure you want to do that? But when it comes time for those road trips, you don't have to really plan, where you're going to stop for charging, like you would if it was a pure EV. You just drive it like a hybrid, and it gets really good fuel economy, even, in hybrid mode. So that's something to consider. Also, the 2021 Pacifica, that's launching imminently. It's getting a mid-cycle update. It's going to be one of the first FCA vehicles to get their new Uconnect 5 infotainment system, which is thoroughly updated, much improved from Uconnect 4.
Yeah, I think I got a walkthrough of that back a couple of months ago, and I was impressed with how thoughtful they were about it and how they did listen to user feedback and adjusted touch targets, and there's a lot of customization you can do with it, and so that will be a good upgrade.
Yeah. And then both of them offer a lot of features. You've got lots of USB ports all around for charging devices, so the kids, if they've got tablets or laptops or something, or games that they want to play, they can keep those charged so they're not pestering you too much. You've got, lots of space in there for, all of the essentials that you have to take along when you're hauling kids along with you. So, I think either one of them would be an excellent choice.
I think, honestly, like the Pacifica is the one I would choose. I just think it has the best combination of features. It's the best priced out there. I think you're just likely to get a better deal on it. It looks better. It drives better. Well, the Honda has a little bit of sportiness to it. But it's, I don't know. I think as an overall package, the Pacifica is really, really tough to beat. The hybrid, you do miss out on stow and go, but if you don't get the hybrid, you get the stow and go seats, which is nice. But that, I don't know that that's a deal breaker without them. And it's just, they know what they're doing with the van, and that's a really well done van. And kids love vans. If you haven't, put your kids in a van, because most cars these days are tanks. They can't see out of them. My kids lost their minds the first time we had a minivan as a media loan, because you put them in it and you put their seats in there, and you latch
and they can actually see out.
Yeah, because they're big windows in the side. They were like, this is awesome. So yeah, do it and enjoy yourself. It's hard to buy a bad van, but
the other great thing about minivans is sliding doors.
Yes.
If you're putting those kids into booster seats, the sliding doors are just so infinitely superior to conventional hinged doors on an SUV. Because first of all, it's not up. It's definitely generally not up as high, so it's easier for you to handle the kids getting in and out. They can move around easier. If they're getting into the third row, it's easier to maneuver around in there than in a typical SUV. One of the nice things about the Odyssey that is unique to the Odyssey is the second row. You can actually move the seats side to side.
Oh, that's right. The magic slide seat or whatever they call it.
Yeah. So, you can, if you've got two, did you say how many kids? Yeah, you got two kids, so, if you need to have them physically separated.
Why would they ever need to be physically separated?
You can have the seats pushed out to the sides and have a walk through to the third row. Or if they want to play a game together or something, you can slide either one of them over to the other side and put them side by side. So you have a bunch of different options in there. So that's definitely something to consider with the Honda.
Yeah. I mean, let us know what you get. The Pacifica, if you buy a high end one too with the screens, it has games on the screens.
Yes, they've got built-in games, so.
Which keeps the peace for about 10 minutes.
Yeah.
All right, so we had a couple of Twitter questions. One of them was just a suggestion to basically attack each other over nothing, but this is not Fox, so we won't be doing that. Let's see. D Levine 61 says, "Is my lust for a 68, 69 Thunderbird with a 428 wrong?" I don't find anything wrong with that. Do you have any thoughts, Sam?
No. I mean, if that's your thing, if you like, big, heavy, big blocks,
and big, heavy, big cars.
Yeah, that can't really go around corners, but it's a cool looking car.
I can't remember what a 68, 69 Thunderbird is. That the one with the hidden lights?
No, that was before the hidden lights. I think that was the 70s ones.
Okay. I mean, those. Oh, yeah. These are the ones that look like Oldsmobiles. Yeah. Knock yourself out, man. Have a good time.
Yeah. Well, actually, they did have hidden lights. Yeah.
Yeah. I see the first ones that come up. Actually, they had the lights open.
Yeah. That was actually a cool looking car, especially the coupe. But even the 4-door Thunderbird, was kind of neat looking. So yeah, I mean, if you like that style, go for it.
It's just really nothing wrong with the 428. It's just enough cast iron to make the Titanic. Let's see. Do you think the PSA and FCA merger will be approved by the EU? Also, why is Mike Manley shunned from the board of Stellantis? Right now, this seems like a PSA takeover of Chrysler, kind of like Daimler-Chrysler's merger of equals.
Yeah, I think it will get approved. I don't see any reason why they wouldn't. Especially, given the way the auto industry is going, we're going to be seeing more consolidation in the industry. That's just a reality. And as far as Manley goes, I was reading about this. The merger agreement was because, this is going to be a European-based company, so they have a board of supervisors. Which is like the board of directors, but a little bit different. And one of the things, in the merger agreement, they said that they would only have one. Only one representative from each of the companies. So Carlos Tavares from PSA and John Alcan from the Agnelli family, that is a major stockholder in PSA. He's the chairman of the holding company that is the biggest shareholder in FCA. So he's also going to be on the board. As far as we know, Manley is sticking around in an executive role. He's just not going to be on the board. Other members of the supervisory board will be outsiders, not coming from either of the two companies.
Yeah. I think that it's more complementary too than the Daimler Chrysler merger of equals. That Chrysler doesn't have any new car platforms or small car platforms, and those are two areas where even if they wanted to make a small crossover, they don't have a platform for it. So they could use it. They have Jeep and Ram, and they've managed to keep.
FCA's got strength in commercial vehicles and trucks and SUVs.
That's true. A lot of the ProMasters and stuff are
right.
Pretty
and PSA, more on the smaller to mid-sized cars and smaller utilities. So and PSA, also has more strength on electric vehicle platforms than FCA does.
Yeah, and so it makes sense that FCA and it's not that FCA hasn't been developing EVs and hybrids and stuff. That just it makes sense that if they're going to buy into another company that's also been doing it, they're gonna maybe take their foot off the pedal a little bit and see where they can lash things together instead of committing too much to a technology that's a dead end because it can't be used across all the brands. So there's a lot that has to go on. I hope that it works out better than the merger of equals that kind of didn't. It was a cultural clash. I don't know that the French kind of because they're, and this is broad generalizations, but the French sort of merging their culture with an American brand versus the Germans doing it.
Well, you're merging with Americans and Italians.
Oh man, we're screwed. It all depends on how much they all kind of agree. It doesn't really matter where they came from. It's a global industry. I mean, Manley's not even from Europe, right?
Yeah, he's English.
Oh, is he? I thought he was from.
Well, he's not from Europe anymore.
Yeah. Well, that's true. The world is so complicated. I actually thought he was from like Australia or New Zealand or something. So, it's a global industry. So it doesn't matter where they come from. It just matters what they sort of agree to do, and then if they stick to it. There was a lot of promise to Daimler Chrysler in the beginning, and we got some good stuff out of it. You can still go buy a Challenger. So that car's never going to die. It's going to be around forever. So, all right.
Hey, as long as people keep buying them.
Yeah, they sell better every year.
Yeah, they sell better now than they ever have.
Nuts.
Yeah.
All right. But that's it. Our podcast is done. We've spent enough time babbling. So thanks everybody for listening. Send in questions. You know where to find us. It is feedback at wheelbearings.media. Keep us on the dial, and we'll see everybody next time.
See ya.